Conversation, where we're joined by a founder and CEO of Sports Legal, Khayran Noor. She is an advocate of the High Court. Welcome to KBC Channel 1.
Thank you, Dan.
And also we've got Odhiambo, where he is an executive committee member of the Kenya Golf Union and also a risk analyst. And let's first of all take a background about sports governance. And this came from the Rio judgment. And 10 days ago, a decision was made by Magistrate Elizabeth Juma, and it was about the spending of money. About 59 million shillings was deemed to have been lost by the people of Kenya. And the people who are found guilty: former Sports Cabinet Secretary Dr. Hassan Wario and the chef de mission of the Rio 2016 Games, Stephen Arab Soy. Let's listen to Elizabeth Juma giving the basis of her judgment.
At the time, the first accused instructed that PW4 and two others be included in Team Kenya. There was no negative publicity. The negative publicity emerged much later when they were already in Rio. The first accused was actually in attendance and chaired part of the steering committee. Some of his officers attended the steering committee. Nothing prevented him from requesting the three to be accredited before the steering committee was resolved. He arbitrarily forced the three to be included in Team Kenya after obtaining Brazilian visa through the embassy, which was contrary to the Olympic accreditation, which was given to the rest of Team Kenya. Both the first and the fourth accused were entrusted leadership to deliver Team Kenya to Rio and to bring good performance. They managed to bring good performance, but in the process, the government of Kenya lost a huge amount of money, and this brought bad image, especially when the story was aired through the media.
So that is the Magistrate Elizabeth Juma, and she was giving the basis for it. It was found that, yes, the former cabinet secretary included 3 people, and what followed was the heavy fines that followed for Cabinet Secretary Wario. For every offense he committed, 300,000 shillings in fines, plus he was to pay double the amount of money that was lost. And Khayran, let me come to you, because the Magistrate Juma used the words restorative and retributive.
Yeah.
Let's just give us that legal background and how it works for such an offense.
Okay, just a general overview on the same. Restitution is meant to be restored to the original state. So either you pay fines or you restore the property or whatever value was claimed to have been stolen. So if it's through fines, you give back maybe the same or equivalent to the same amount of money that was stolen, or if it's a property, you give it back to the rightful owner. For retribution, which is also named deterrence, is all kinds of punishments. So in the case of, say, murder, you're given life sentencing. It's meant to act as an example or as a reform, as a deterrence for now anyone who would want to commit a similar crime, to think, just to reflect back on what you're going to lose or what you fail to, you pose to face, once you're found guilty. In this case, CS Wario was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Stephen Soy 10 years.
Actually,
yes.
17.
17. I stand corrected. So they're still open to appeal, but that's the judgment as it stands.
And Collins, let me come to you and from what Khayran has said, and she's spoken about, especially when it comes to the fines, because The cost for every person who was included by CS were 450,000. There were 3. The fines for that 2.7 million. And for Stephen Arabsoy, I just, when I was doing this math, it hit me. He paid total fines amounting to 116 million shillings, yes, or 17 years in prison, and the offense and the amount of money lost by Kenyans was 57 million. Looking from that point, how heavy as a deterrent is it for anyone who's in administration or may be tempted to commit an economic crime?
Actually, that it has a big implication. Number one, you remember, if you look at the one for the CS, there were specific people who are attached to him. Mm-hmm. But if you look at, so he was the chief of mission, he was accused being the head. Everybody that was an extra, he had a responsibility to take care of the funds that were being utilized. Mm-hmm. Number one, any person who is in charge moving forward, they'll know if you're in charge and you approve, it doesn't matter whether you benefited or not. Because if you look at that, the 100 million you're talking about, it's not that he benefited.
Actually, he didn't.
Yes, it's other people who benefited, but he was actually the person who approved or in charge. Mm-hmm. So in terms of accountability, it raises the bar. So that when you're in charge of a delegation or a sports organization, it comes back to you. It's not a matter of saying, no, I did not do it or I did not benefit. Is you are in charge, you are responsible, and you are accountable.
Now, something else that came out from that judgment, and it's got to be said, is that there were 125 people who were in competition proper. 80 athletes, 45 officials, but the Kenyan delegation was 154. And it came out as there was the feeling that it was athlete last all the way. Khayran, looking at what we saw, the extra members of the delegations and what happened, yes, what is that learning lesson that was brought out from this judgment, and also from the report that of the probe team by Professor Paul Ochieng?
Well, for me, I feel like sports governance is prides of autonomy. It's given priority that because of the specific nature of sports, they get the right to self-governance, self-rule. But then at the same time, autonomy hides corruption. Autonomy hides all these bribery, match fixing, money laundering in sports. So for us to be able to bring this on face value, because we find that it's in contravention of the law, mm-hmm, it's in contravention of public order, integrity and ethics. So we have to hold such public officials and people who are responsible accountable, and there must be transparency. Yes, I mean, sports persons are what makes sports. Today we have Olympics because we have athletes who are going to participate, and they dedicate to training and all this. Like, it's their life, it's their livelihood, it's their profession. So why should we put them last when it comes to them representing us in the international platform or even on the local level? Yeah, because without them, we can't have anything to watch on the TV, or we can't have pride over, the likes of Kipchoge, Keino, and Eliud Kipchoge, Catherine Dereba. They're there because they dedicated their lives to it. They should be put first. They are the face of sports. They're the face of athletics in Kenya. They're the ones who bring pride to Kenya, in the sports world. Yeah. So without them, I feel like if we fail them, then we failed ourselves.
And one of the things that came out from that Rio probe was how the athletes were handled. One of them was a former member of parliament, and he was in the marathon team. So when we talk about Wesley Korir, and he was out there saying, look, I was taken to some place, I think even the river road lodgings in Nairobi are good enough. Mm. But as a sports administrator, what is it that you've seen that should be done anytime a delegation is traveling, whether even within Kenya or outside Kenya, so that they are comfortable and they do not come out and complain? Because the athletes now have the power. After that decision, they now have some power.
Yes, yeah. So I think from an administrative perspective, is to, I'll go back to the issue of raising the bar. And then other than accountability, there's also the issue of professionalism.
Yes.
If you look at the background of sports administration, it came from you are doing, this is the job that you do, and then you go as pastime, you're in sports.
Yes.
And then over time, what it created is that you don't have the same seriousness in when you go to sport, because it's
full-time,
it's hobby and all that, as the one that you'll be having in the office or where it's too professional.
Yes.
So moving forward is to have it at the same level. The professionalism that is in all sectors in your business, where you work, is the same aspect of professionalism that we need to bring in sports administration. If you look at even right now,
yes,
we have people who go to school. They have degrees, they basically to study
sports management,
sports management, all
sports
that.
science, sports medicine.
Yes, and that's going to help in having the standards high. When you look at now the administrators, people who are in the executive and all that, they need to ensure that they've created systems within the organizations. One, to bring order.
Yes.
These are the duties, these are the people, this is what's supposed to happen and all that. And then secondly, tie that with accountability. If you have those two, it means that if, let's say you have an event or you have a team that it's very clear who is supposed to be in the team. There's a way of getting into the team. If officials accompany the team, who is supposed to accompany and what are they doing?
Some use these joy riders.
Yes, yeah.
That is the one that you
yes, yeah. But you know, if you go to that level, you'll be saying, yes, you're having an official accompany the team, but they are doing A, B, C, D. So that you don't need all officials, for example, to accompany a team. You may need 3, you may need 4, you may need whatever number. So that you're not in a situation whereby when the officials stand up and the affiliates of players stand, the officials are more, or they're equal, or
there's a neighboring country that had a delegation of what, 56 to the Olympics.
Yes.
But 30 were officials, 25 were athletes.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. So if you have those, if you bring the level of professionalism up, it will also be, it will be easier to achieve that, because without it is even. You know, you have even now when you talk about J Riders, there are also add-ons, the plus ones and all that. So you have a list of people, but because there are no systems and structures, it's very easy for someone to get in that list despite not, without...
whose role is not known.
Yes.
Something else that came out is how much disclosure has to be given. The IOC system, and this is how it works, is that the chef de mission, the president of the National Olympic Committee, and the Secretary General of that National Olympic Committee have all their expenses met by the IOC whenever they travel for an Olympic Games. And what happened is there is the possibility of asset recovery from the then president of the National Olympic Committee for the money spent on air tickets and per diems and accommodation, and also from the Secretary General then. And that was also part of what Magistrate Elizabeth Juma put out. So let me come to you, Khayran.
Yeah.
Disclosure of such information, because people do not say it. They will say, "Awatajua," but eventually it's come out in the open. So there is money that's lost by people taking what is called double per diems.
Yeah. So I'll just go back to the issue on governance. Yeah. The right to autonomy has to be earned. So when governance is perceived to be poor, external intervention by governments and law enforcement agencies become more likely. Yeah, especially in a constitutional state, autonomy is almost, you know, it's not 100% possible. There's some sort of checks and balances that have to be put across, because when you say you're self-ruling and you're self-governing, you have to hold the highest standards of ethics and integrity. Yeah. So if you are perceived to be contravening with that, how do we now come in to combat the same? So that's why you might be required to now disclose information such as this, and I think that's what exactly happened, you know, in getting a hold of records such as this to hold these, you know, state officials accountable. Because without that, then you wouldn't know what really happened behind the scenes.
Asset recovery, you could just give us a basis of how this would work.
Yeah.
Because if I owe the government $1 million, there are 2 choices. The Asset Recovery Agency either goes to my bank, and they realize that there are more zeros after the decimal point, not before, and so they decide to come for my property. How does it work?
Okay, it works in different ways. Say, like you said, they can go to your bank records. You have to verify the source of your income. It could also be in a way that, you know, if you're proved guilty, then they look at your properties. So you might not be rich liquid, but you can be, you could have hidden your source of, you know, the funds in some sort of way through property. So they have to look at that. Yeah. In your position, in your income that you're meant to have been earning, can it like balance? Can it verify that, okay, I earn 100 million, say $1 million a month? Can or I run a business worth this much, can I prove that I can actually afford all these things? So it can be auctioned in a way that now you recover if you're found guilty, things like that, yeah.
And Collins, let me bring out something else that came out from this, is that for teams that do postmortems of any event that's covered, in the case of CS Wario, he put together the probe team, and the probe team went out and said, by the way, Mr. Appointing Authority, you are also culpable. How is it going to change going forward? How sporting organizations, which like Khayran says, operate on a basis of autonomy, going forward will be working with state agencies, because it means now a PS, a director of administration, or any government official now, even if you appoint a probe team, they can actually say you're culpable.
Yeah. There are two things there. First of all, is that if you don't do it yourself, you are inviting others to come. So you rather work very hard to do, even if there's a problem, have mechanism, work very hard to ensure that you sort it out and you demonstrate that you are able to sort. Because the external help, which is always not very good, will only come if you are unable, because if you are unable to sort it out internally or in your discipline, people will complain, and they won't come to you. They'll go to the authorities. So the biggest, the main safeguard is to ensure that you have internally the mechanism. Of course, you uphold also your integrity standards, so that anyone who's looking at what you're doing, as much as you're independent and you're doing your own things, you are able to, there's confidence.
Yes.
Most sporting organizations, there's a lot of independence, non-interference. But if you look at the highest level, for example, FIFA, IWF, they all have ethics committees which are independent.
Actually, the FIFA one is no longer independent. Since Gianni Infantino.
So, but basically, this is supposed to be, in fact, the guys who are running issues of ethics are not part of the executive. They are totally, they are separate.
Yes.
Because I've been able to work closely with the one for the IWF committee, so I've seen
the athletics integrity unit. Currently.
Yes.
Previously, the IAAF ethics.
Yes, So I've worked with them closely, and I've seen how they've done. If you want interference, you'll need to go outside. It's been made difficult because the guys who are running it are independent and all that. And then secondly, when you come now in our local setting, since the Sports Act came into force, number one, it brought a benefit to sporting organizations in the terms of government funding.
Yes.
You have budgets you are given, meaning the exchequer is paying for you. But when the public pays, they have a right to know what are you doing. Essentially, through the act, from the registrar or the ministry, and all these government agencies can come to check around accountability in terms of public money. If you look at the issue, basically even the Public Officers Act, even the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crime Act, the definition of the public officer, it has many things, but one thing that is also there is a committee that is appointed to serve public interest or national interest, or a team that is supported by. So any person who's in a committee that is determined from public,
that act,
it becomes above. So you will be held to the same standard.
Now, Khayran, let me talk about that public officer aspect, because it shocks a lot. I mean, people in sport want to be independent. How would you then look at, say, athletic? Which team is out there? The basketball. Think of the women's basketball team who are in Cameroon. how then does the leader of that delegation become a public officer in law, or by definition? Because you're heading that delegation and you've got money from the sports and from the sports fund taking care of the team.
Yeah. I think, I mean, generally, so long as you hold an office that is defined under any public law act, like is mentioned, the Leadership and, you know, Integrity Act, Public Officers Act, you hold the responsibility directly, especially also if the funds that you're paid for comes from the people or the government. Yeah. So once you have that responsibility and once you are given that authority, you hold a certain obligation and duties towards the public. Yeah. Today, as a director in a company, I cannot say I have to disclose everything to the public. Yeah. It's a private entity. But so long as you're in a public office, public eye, today you do something, people will start questioning because they have the right to do it. Yeah. So I think it comes with the roles and responsibilities you hold. Who do you answer to? Who do you represent when you go out there? Yeah.
And he also mentioned something about FIFA.
Yeah.
Now there was FIFAgate, and people were picked from their 5-star accommodation and put in cars, and they were using bed sheets so that people wouldn't know who are these people who move and shake things in football.
Yeah.
That, you know, were picked up by Swiss Corps, and that changed everything. That there is that one, and there is Sochi. FIFAgate involves, I think, Russia and Qatar World Cups.
Yeah.
Then there is Sochi,
The Winter Olympics.
and the Winter Olympics,
Yeah.
and the Salt Lake Olympics of
Olympics,
98.
yes.
Yes. How did those three, you know, change the way people look at things from the top?
Yeah. So at that time, yes, the proponents of self-governance, you know, like the likes of Thomas Bach, they're really advocating for sports should be left alone from political interference. But you find it's impossible because the same thing that happened in the 98 Olympics, the same thing that happened in the Sochi Olympics or FIFA scandal that you just mentioned, these are things that brought in public scrutiny. Yeah, they contravened public order, they contravened the national laws, whatever country that, you know, at that time was responsible. So you can't really say you have to be free from that. Sports cannot be fully free from political influence in that regard. Yeah, and that is how, like, from the 1998 Salt Water Lake scandal, that's where things like good governance, how do we now make sure sports has good governance principles, things like, you know, that's when the UN Convention Against Corruption in the 2013 came about, you know, to fight corruption and prevention of corruption in major public events. Yeah. Yes. So this is because you know, it clearly says that we should place sports at the service of humanity, because sports is a social dimension.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have to create a new balance between political, economic, social, and sporting forces need to be found to fight overall corruption in sports.
And Collins, let me come in, because as a person who's worked with the IAAF Ethics Board, which is now the AIU, Kenyans were sanctioned, and something happened in one of those sanctions. One person the investigation was there, but it was found that by the office he holds, he was not subject to the ethical standards that were set by the IAAF. So they say, yes, it looks like we can't really charge you under this law. How much needs to change such that you have a uniform law which affects, when you talk about it at international level, confederation level, and national level?
Even, you see, that one is, it's even, I think it's beyond the law. Because as she said, it's very difficult when you start talking about interference. It cannot be, you cannot achieve full independence. Why I'm saying it's a collaboration discussion, as a standard, the international federations will insist. If there's interference, we crack our whip, and they'll never compromise on that.
Yeah, but they're always happy with the financial intervention.
I get it. So they always, and then what also happens in the respective countries, the federation know that they just need to align with the international
body. Yes.
But then the reality of life is that you are in a country. Every country is sovereign. with its own laws, and you are subject to the laws of that land.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to look at saying how do you address this legally, but because of sovereignty, the laws of the land must be followed. But now where the collaboration and a way of achieving a balance is whereby, yes, you're sovereign. When you're here, as much as there should be no interference, you don't just close your eye because you cannot interfere.
Yes.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, and the international federations are trying. Yes, they don't want interference, but you'll realize that whenever they have their members doing something, they start on their own, yeah, so that they can, if it changes or probes, they do it so that they demonstrate that they are doing something about it, which helps them to ensure that they still have the independence. It will be difficult to have just one, let's say, blanket law that can sort it out, because also different countries have different systems. Like in Kenya, we are lucky. Like in Africa, we are at an advanced level in terms of how the law works and respect for the rule of law. There are some countries you can be told to go to hell with your independence and international affiliation.
Yeah, but there is one thing you haven't answered, and this is what I'm asking.
Yes.
And this is specifically from a Kenya case.
Okay.
That by the IAAF Ethics Board, I think it was the last decision made by the IAAF Ethics Board,
Yes.
is that somebody was charged. They said, look, according to this IAAF standards,
Yes.
Three people were charged.
Yes.
One passed away. One was found guilty.
Yes.
The other one was told, listen, we can't sanction him because he doesn't fall under our code of conduct.
Yes.
The question is then, how do you downstream it from IAAF level to CAA to now Athletics Kenya, such that the same standard at World Athletics is what you have at Athletics Kenya?
Yeah. So the issue is around domesticating what you have from there, because if you domesticate and have the same standards as a minimum, because I believe if you have a standard as a minimum, if in your special case you can take it higher.
Yes.
As long as you've met the minimum. So I think that can be something that is can be helpful. But you remember these standards are part of self-regulating.
Yes.
Yes. It's part of, because it may not look right, but it's part of self-regulating. So if this is what you decided, you can, within that, you can try to improve it. But if it's not, it means that is the basic. And if you are not catered for there, now the law of that country comes in. Because there's nothing that stops, for example, if something is if it's a crime.
Yes.
It doesn't matter where or who. A crime is a crime.
Yeah.
And now the local law and the agencies and the process of justice will check in.
Well, then when you talk about local law, I mean, when you talk about criminal crime, you know, FIFA or Sepp Blatter's era at FIFA was put an end because of the United States using criminal law to indict people who took money from FIFA, and they were told what you're running is actually a racket. And overall, some of the things that are being spoken about, and Collins, you mentioned it earlier, there's a lot of volunteerism in sport. Khayran, what's the direction with hiring professionals, the sports scientists, people who studied sports management, or people in your field, which is sports law?
Yeah.
How much of an uptick of those professionals is there?
Come again?
The accepting professionals, sports managers, sports lawyers, sports scientists, to change the way sport is run in the country.
Oh, okay. You see, with the, like Collins had earlier mentioned, professionalism of sports. Nowadays, you find for someone to be a sports person, most often than not, maybe not the situation in Kenya, but most sports persons do this full time, you know, like the footballers, athletes generally. For them, it's a full-time job. This is what they earn their income from. So either by playing the sport through sponsorships and endorsements, etc. So, and with the commercialization of sports, we find sports does make a lot of money from it, you know, through TV rights, broadcasting rights, sponsorship, etc. But then, so now you find the growth of professionals in the sports who come in now for the sole purpose of proper structures and proper decision making.
All right.
Yeah. So you find the sports managers, like you say, sports lawyers, sports medical staff, because in an institution you have to have all these people in place for them, because they understand how the structure works, and they're the best people who would come in to manage and make the decisions.
All right, Khayran, let me just interrupt you, and we will get back to this conversation about sports governance. We are with Khayran Noor, she's a sports lawyer, and we are with Collins Odhiambo. He is an executive member of the Kenya Golf Union and also a risk analyst. We continue with our conversation, and it is about governance in sports and how it's going to change. And this is post the Rio decision, after former cabinet secretary Hassan Wario was fined 3.6 million shillings, or if he hadn't paid the fine, he would have spent 6 years of jail time. Stephen Arap Soy sentenced to a cumulative 17 years of jail time and fines of 116 million shillings. And this was after they were found culpable of the Rio Games scandal. Khayran, you spoken about, just before we went over to Mondiga, you mentioned about the professionals who are supposed to come in. And Collins, let me come to you. I want you to weigh in on that.
Yes.
How quick have you seen from the sports ecosystem the acceptance of some of these professionals? Because there are some federations that will say, wewe ulicheza hii mchezo wapi? So what are you coming to tell us? Ulicheza wapi?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll start with an analogy. You've seen football is very popular, especially the English Premier League.
Yes.
We have stars. You'll be a star for 5, 7, 10 years. World player of the year and all that. That does not necessarily mean you're going to be a good coach. In fact, we've seen them struggling. Those transit into coaching, they struggle into coaching. And you find that the best coaches were not necessarily the best players. Even some of them, their career ended, they never made it even to play the national leagues in their country. So having said that, now coming back to what you've asked, is that when you bring professionals, let professionals do the work, let athletes do their thing, and in leadership, because you cannot be, we've gone from the days whereby you are a federation chief and you are carrying everything about it on your briefcase. As in when you are seen in the office,
federation, and the federation
is you. So with the professionalism, it means we have a professional who's gone to school, let them come do the work. Yes, you are in the leadership, and now that's where you have the leadership. You exercise oversight.
Yes.
The executive teams, the boards will exercise oversight, but the day-to-day running of the activities of the federation is left to the secretariat or the employees who are the professionals she's talking about. So that way, it means they are dedicated to it, and they'll be able to help in upgrading the standard better, as opposed to having those in leadership being the guys who are deciding what to do and then go ahead to implement them. So that's the way to go around it, and it will help us upgrade the level of professionalism, and it will be seen in delivery of what the sporting organizations are doing.
Khayran, what would you like to see change in Kenya when it comes to the governance of sport? Because you founded a sports law firm with knowing that there is an opportunity for you.
Yeah. I think for international sport to be able to fulfill its full potential, to benefit individuals and society by reducing the efficiency and effectiveness, not reducing, but increasing yes. The efficiency and effectiveness of use of resources available of sport, we need to have the right structures and reforms. Although reforms may generally be hard to implement or difficult to implement, because the same individuals who manage sports are the same one who make decisions in sports. So like Collins just said, we need to have the right professionals. We need to have people who actually understand how sports work, how the structure works, and how the same can be done to properly manage and have organizational transparency, reporting transparency, and stakeholder representation, and a democratic process, in elections, appointments. So I think we need to really look at how we run the system. We need to put the right people in place, the people who have the right intentions, if I may to add, because you can put the right people, but then they don't have the right intentions. So I think that's where we need to look into the structure, the foundation of sports in Kenya and generally internationally.
And what about the culture shift? Because the risk of an election in Kenya, be it like the late J.J. Kabode used to say, at a cattle dip or at the presidency, it is the delegate who, it's the one who entertains the delegates most.
Yes.
I mean, yes,
popular.
Yes, becomes popular. So the question is then, how much do we change this culture, Khayran? Because it's affected some federations.
Yeah. I think the culture needs to change in terms of, we've already spoken about it with the commercialization and professionalism of sport. The culture needs to change for it to be viewed as a hobby or as an amateur level ecosystem, because you find people actually depend on these on sports generally as a form of livelihood. It's a career choice for some people. Yeah. So we need to prioritize the development of sports first. We need to look at it because, like we've discussed this before, the money is there, but how is it put into the system? Is there infrastructure development? Is there proper education in sports? How do we make sure that the federations that are in place are run properly? Yeah, I mean, I think it all boils down to the level, ground level going up, grassroots development to professionalism, the structure in between. How do we create a balance? How do we bring the proper reforms? And how do we work hard to implement the same?
Collins, as a risk analyst overall, if you were to give a short, especially from the financial end, because we know of some corporates which have said openly, we will not touch particular sports. With a 20-foot pole, a 10-foot one, they say it's short. So they really need to physically distance from some of these federations. Then, how much can we generate? Because if sports, the kind of money in sports that I see has the potential to flow in Kenya, but it's not happening. How do you attract this money?
Okay, the most basic is what we've been talking about. You see, the beauty around the governance, having systems and all those things in place, they create credibility. And if when you're talking about standards, it's what was about remove the stand from the international and local. If you set the high bar, first of all, you've eliminated the chance of some people getting into leadership. So with the high standard, even from delegate level,
yes,
you've already sorted out by default a percentage. So that's the minimum that we need to do. Because if you don't get it right, those delegates are the ones who are going to either rise to the top or make the decision. So having standards is good for the industry and then also for the sponsors. Because you see, as much as saying sports, it's business and all that.
Yes.
These guys want to get to the market. There's a commercial goal even for the guys who bring money.
Yeah.
And the issue of credibility and reputation is important. Build reputation, having the minimum standard possible, and you'll see those who are saying they want to stay 20 feet back, they'll start coming to 5, 3, and then
give you a hug.
Yes, when they see the standards have been maintained, you can have the standards today, but you don't maintain them. If they're maintained, you'll see them now. Even you don't need even to go look for sponsors because they'll see it becomes attractive. Because if you're having a sport that is well run, the numbers are there, they see value. They actually, the chasing will be coming from the corporate side to the sporting institutions.
So that you can say, hey, listen, I need the name Kenya on my shirt. Yes. So please, stay there. Yeah. And Khayran, as we close, the legal outlook for sport in Kenya from a sports law perspective, how well is it set up for the future? Any tweaking that needs to be done?
I think I always say sports law is still at its infancy. There's still a lot of development and growth that needs to be done. We have the Sports Act, but then we've had different people coming to say it's not yet sufficient, or it's not yet, it doesn't cover all aspects, or it doesn't stand on its own. We still have to create subsidiaries, or we also need to maybe check into the Sports Act to bring in all these other aspects that are coming into place. Like dispute resolution, we have the sports tribunal.
Yes.
But how well do people understand how it works? Do athletes also know that there's this recourse, or there's actually even sports lawyers who can represent them? Are people educated? Because if you look at one of the aspects that I sometimes talk about is doping. Many athletes are, found guilty in doping because of the ignorance behind it. Yes. And
it's a risk. They say there is no ignorance.
It's a strict liability. Yeah, it's a
law.
Strict liability offense, because also the moment you put yourself in a platform that you say, today I'm a professional athlete, you're deemed to ought to know.
Yes.
Yes, I'm a professional, WADA code applies to me. So if you are found guilty, regardless of how you got that substance in your system, they don't want to know. But then you find most of them, if you actually talk to them, they said, I didn't know, or I went to a general practitioner who told me this medicine is okay for you, you can use it, but you cannot go back and place blame. Okay, it can be a mitigating factor, but you won't be totally scot-free. Yeah, so I think it's all about the education of the masses, people learning the proper knowledge behind sports law, putting the proper structures where people actually know what sports law is, because I think at this level most people also don't know what sports law is all about, or what it entails, or what a sports lawyer does. Yes.
And Collins, as we close, I want to weigh in on that, because on some conversation you mentioned to me, there is a private members bill in the Senate about an amendment to the Sports Act.
Yes.
If you were to touch on it, do you see that if it could strengthen what we have at the moment?
It's making it better, but are not addressing the issues that have been there. Because this private member bill is actually, there's a loophole. You see, we have everything is national.
Yes.
Even the registrar has powers to register county sports organization. But after devolution, there's nothing in the devolved units to support what is there nationally. That bill is mainly addressing that, so that in every county you can have a system of ensuring that these issues of the Sports Act are implemented, and also counties, which will also give an opportunity for counties to look at funding sports within their domain or within their counties better. Though that, you see, it's a Senate bill.
Yes.
It's addressing that issue of county and improving that level. The improvements that are required and what Noor is talking about will need to amend the main act, which is a national.
Which would actually emanate from the National Assembly.
Which emanates from the National Assembly. So it's a step in terms of the devolution, but it has not addressed the gaps that are there in the act that was there. So that is still that's something that needs to happen. And as she said, many people are not aware. So that even contributing to the improvement, people need to be aware first, maybe which is work for them to ensure that people know what is happening, so that they're able to contribute in terms of improvement. One thing that has come across board, even if you look at the federations, the NOC and all that, the law, I don't think proper consultation was done, because everyone is complaining about, there are good things that are there.
Yes.
They can improve governance and compliance. In fact, even the leadership and integrity issues are included there, which is a good thing. But how to comply has been the bottle in the neck. And then secondly, when was the act passed?
2013.
Yeah, in 2021. Still, how many people have complied?
Can count them. And those who are there have had to be forced to comply.
So it's good, but we are sliding into the problem that we've been having in the country, where you have in the shelves you have very nice but implementation. But that thing of compliance, if it was if we are able to comply, all of us will have been in a better. Will have been in a higher level, even despite the things that need to be improved. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Collins Odhiambo. He is a member of the KG executive, and he's also a risk analyst speaking about sports governance. And we've got the founder and CEO of Sports Legal, Khayran Noor. Thank you very much, lady and gentlemen, for speaking about this. This is a conversation that can't end. You brought out another aspect, anti-doping. It's a pet subject, so we'll get into that. We'll be moving on to another conversation, and it is about East Africa's premier golf tour. We're talking about the Safari Tour. The first leg is on at Sigona, but what about the other events, and what are the tweaks that have been made to help improve it and attract more numbers onto the pro golf scene? We'll be speaking with the tournament director of the Safari Tour, Patrick Obath, next.